What is racing a lap at Road Atlanta like?
It's very similar how I was describing Watkins Glen. Very, very fast, daunting. A lot of places to not make mistakes with a lot of room for error, and just a lot of blind corners. So, for instance, there's a lot of areas of the track where you're going over a blind crest and the road turns and you're diving down a hill and back up the other way. And then the final corner onto the front straight is flat out in most cars, but it's very, very fast. So it's down a big steep hill. It is a great spectator track too. You can see some incredible vantage points from all around that circuit.
Have you ever raced at Motorsport?
Yes, that's an iconic one. Very fast, very similar to a Road Atlanta. I think that to me might be the fastest track, a sports car track I've raced on because I remember we were there with the Mazda prototypes and the lap is 2.5 miles and we were lapping in just over a minute. I mean, that's amazing. I think it was a minute and five, a minute and 6 seconds, which, translates to well over 120 mile an hour average speed. And you're talking about there's even a corner there that's a 50 mile an hour corner. So to make up all that extra speed otherwise is it's amazing.
I bet. I wish I could ride around Motorsport one of these days.
Yeah, it's just over the border, in outside of Toronto. Great area of the country, especially in the summer. I'm sure right now with the most recent storm systems, it's probably under some snow, but yeah, really, really iconic place.
Ron Fellows described it as being very similar to Watkins Glen. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And it's got that same kind of that same feel like I was talking about Watkins or Road Atlanta, where it has these big, big diving corners downhill that are blind, a lot of commitment, not a lot of room for error. You know, uh, as far as if you go off, it's very rewarding when you get it right.
For sure. So, what are all the types of GT cars like GT America, GT4, and IMSA and all that? Like, what's all that about, and what are the differences?
Yeah, it can be confusing sometime as a new fan to sports car racing what that's all about. But essentially, you have your GT3 car, which is your fastest type of GT car. It's got the most power, the most downforce, so aerodynamic grip, right? It's got the biggest wings and all that stuff on it, and that is kind of the de facto across the world a platform, a spec platform. A lot of manufacturers in that arena in that class. So it's which is really exciting because then you have your favorite brands and they all build a GT3 car, and it allows teams to not necessarily have to build the car. They literally just have to purchase and then maintain and run it. And it's really changed the dynamic in racing, not even in NASCAR, not really a lot of fabrication anymore to build the cars. It's all manufacturer built and spec, which makes the advantage makes the racing very close by doing it that way. And then after GT3 cars, you have GT4, which is kind of the smaller versions of all those GT3 cars. So still a factory built race car, never once was a street car. So all factory built, but less aerodynamics, a little less power, about 100 less horsepower. So you're talking about 450-ish, 4 to 450 on horsepower. Still a very fast car. But I enjoy the GT4 cars because they're less aerodynamic dependent and you can race very closely without, you'll hear about aero wash in IndyCar or even in NASCAR, where they get up close and you lose the grip on the steering tires on the front of the car because you're up too close. GT4 cars don't have that much of an issue with that. So you can really race really close, make a lot of passes and not get stuck a second or two behind a car and you're kind of like stalled out, if you will, right? So that's really the two main GT classes, and you have certain series might name them differently, but that truly the basis of the cars.
Makes a lot of sense. Why are the horsepowers different? Is it just for driver comfort or competition or?
Yeah, so exactly. They change the what they call the BOP, which is the balance of performance for each car to try to tune them so they're all even. So for instance, one car might be lighter, so it's naturally going to have to be a little less power because it would accelerate faster than all the others. So what they do is they tune each car and it changes the sliding scale throughout the season. They tune the car to basically make more power, a little less power. They might add a little weight, take a little weight away to all the different cars to try to balance them out. And ultimately, it's never going to be perfect. And there's going to be certain tracks that suit certain cars better than others. But across the board, the series do a pretty good job of adjusting it through the year to get it close. And some years, there's a certain favorite manufacturer or two, and other years there's a different one. But it is remarkable when you think about a field of 20 some odd cars around a 2 or 3 mile track being within tenths of a second. It's like you can barely click the stopwatch that fast, let alone have a make a 3 mile lap and be that close.
It's amazing. Was there a race you won that you shouldn't have won but got lucky?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Definitely have had those. And feel like you remember more of the other ones where, you should have won and then bad luck went your way and it took it from you. Those hurt a lot more.
Yeah.
But definitely have some races fall in our lap. I remember one just recently, couple of years ago, where we had good pace, running consistently throughout. And in the last 5 laps, the leader, who had like a 5 or 6 second lead, pretty big lead, I think had an issue with one of the tires, and it started. It was like a slow puncture, right? And so it started losing air, and like instead of catching them by a tenth of a second a lap, you're catching them by a second a lap. And it came down to the last lap and making a pass, the last several corners for the win. Never would have happened. You would have ended up second every other time, but that time because of that ended up kind of falling into our lap. So sometimes sometimes you're lucky and sometimes you're unlucky.
Yeah, reminds me of my go-karting days where a couple times I dominated races only to lose it coming to the white flag or on the final lap, and those are always the heartbreaking ones.
Exactly. What kind of go-karts?
Oh, I just raced him at like at some exhibition events, like at golf cart or no, golf kind of tracks. Those tracks they have at golf courses. Or I did a couple of those, and then I did some exhibition events. I think during my teen years where I actually
Really?
got prizes if I won, and there were a couple times during those years where I dominated the race, and one I led almost every lap except for the final one. And then it's like that person makes that last lap pass on you, and in the end, you don't make I mean, you can lead the most race, but there's one lap that matters, and it's that checkered flag one. And I just remember being beaten by someone or coming either to the white flag or coming to the start finish line. And when I realized I lost, I would just pound the steering wheel in frustration.
Yeah. Yeah. That's tough. It's tough, but it makes us come back for more.
Yeah. And another time, though, there was a time where I won a race I really shouldn't have. I think I qualified fourth in the go-kart. And what was funny was I had a go-kart in that race that was terrible. I'm actually surprised I didn't qualify last, but there was a new guy that was new to the exhibition races, and he was an Englishman. And what was funny was he had a 10 times better go-kart than I did. He should have won that race, but on the first lap, we went through the first turn and he spun out and depleted everybody in the field except for me. And so I took the lead, and And eventually some drivers returned to the track, but by that point they were like 10 laps down with no chance. And so I went on to win, and then I stood on the podium and then looked over my shoulder and saw the drivers all going after the English guy for his inexperience. And I
Yeah.
couldn't help but chuckle a little bit.
Yeah, that's all part of it. I mean, it's like I say, you can be having your best day and something mechanical go wrong with the car, or someone take you out, or something. It's a tough sport from that standpoint. There's no timeouts. When you have an injury, there's no timeouts like football.
Yeah, I have another memory from my go-karting days if you want to hear it, and it was a funny moment. One exhibition race, I competed with my brother being one of the competitors, and it was the only time I think he was behind a go-kart. And I remember that he qualified second and I was like fifth or something. And when the race went green, my brother took the lead and led the first couple laps. But then he had a parts failure. And by then I had climbed to second. And so the minute I passed him, I saw him stalled on the track and I just waved, like to say goodbye, a little gloatingly. And then I went on to win and he had to be towed off the track.
Oh man.
I don't think
Oh,
he drove a go-kart after that.
family rivalries.
Yeah, but it was just funny how I saw him break down. I was second, and I just waved goodbye to him as I went by.
Love it. Love it.
Sibling rivalry.
Absolutely.
Do you have any moments like that?